Hi, I'm Lauren.
And I'm Matt.
And this is Publish and Prosper,
Where publishing, e-commerce, and marketing collide.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Publish and Prosper. This is episode number 72. And to anyone listening to this episode, I am going to tell you right now, this is going to be a very visual heavy episode. So if you have ever been interested in checking out our YouTube videos to watch the episode instead of listening to it, or if you didn't know maybe that we have full video on YouTube for all of these episodes, this might be the episode for you to go check it out.
Yeah, this would probably be a good one because it's going to be visual heavy.
Yes.
As Lauren alluded to.
Yes. Which is not to say that you can't listen to it, because we're going to do our best to be descriptive with what we're talking about.
We will.
But there's definitely going to be a lot of props, I guess we could say.
Not props.
What would you call them?
Books.
Oh, books.
They're books.
Oh, is that what this is?
Yeah. They're not props. It's not stage
Sure.
paraphernalia, costumes, or anything of this sort. It's just books.
Imagine if I showed up here one day and said, Matt, I'm going to need you to start using props in this episode.
I'm not sure how I would react. I'd probably stick around to see what you were talking about at least.
It would depend on the prop.
Yeah, if I had to dress up in like a cape or wear a sword or something, I'm out. I can't commit to that.
It would be very uncomfortable to sit in this chair with a sword strapped to your belt. So,
yeah, that's my point.
Right. Yeah. No, I would never ask you to do that. Don't
I don't
you
know
worry.
about that, but
a sword, no. A cape, maybe. But even then, that would also mean you're sitting down. How would anyone know?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, we're not doing that. What we are doing is showing off a lot of book samples in this episode. So today we will be talking about kind of the different types of products that you can make with print-on-demand books specifically, but also like the actual formatting and design details that are involved in that process.
Right.
Because that is something that we talk to people about a lot, and it's one of my favorite things about being at like an in-person event and having like conversations with people in person where we're able to actually physically show them, okay, this is the difference between a matte cover and a glossy cover. This is the difference between the different paper weights that we have. Like, this is what standard color versus premium color looks like. And that's something that is hard to get a real feel for when you're just looking at content on our website or even like photos on our social media or something like that.
Yeah, it's also hard to even try and go and figure that out on your own in just like a bookstore or something. If you don't know the terminology, if you don't know exactly what you're holding, if you don't know what 60-pound paperweight looks and feels like, or if you don't understand, some of those other things, it's hard for you to even know and connect those dots, let alone, just see it on our website or somebody else's website.
Right.
So, yeah, the hope is that, maybe after this episode, you'll be a much more educated person when it comes to the fundamentals of print and print books and print on demand.
I like that.
Okay, cool.
I like that. I also kind of like that as a title. I might write that down. We'll see.
Well, it's recorded. You don't have to write it down, but
I'm glad you remembered that this time.
Yes,
Especially since I had no means of writing that down.
Yeah.
So that's okay. I am actually going to shout out at the top of this episode some of the resources that I'm going to have linked in the show notes. Whether or not you are listening or watching, they will be probably good aids for you as you're listening to this. We have a couple other episodes linked, obviously, and some blog posts, but I want to shout out a video that we've shouted out before that is a YouTube video called The Life of a Book.
Yeah.
That our amazing videographer, Ashley, created, I think actually a year or two ago at this point, but it's it shows the production process of how a book is made. So you'll see some of the things that we're talking about in this episode. And it's also just a really cool video. Like, I low-key cried the first time Matt showed it to me. Like, I definitely got a little emotional. It was very cool. So definitely check that out. And then we've got a bunch of resources linked. So we put together a few years ago a glossary of publishing terms that lives on our website. So we're going to try to explain everything as best we can here. But if there's something that, both Matt and I skip over because we don't think about defining it because it's something we use all the time, we've got a whole glossary of terms that I have linked in the show notes so you can go check out. So, going to recommend that for sure.
Sounds like a lot of lofty promises. We should probably get started.
I think we should. I think there's a lot of content in this episode, and we should dive right in.
Well, let's start from the top, from the basics. Print on demand, for those who don't know, print on demand is the actual process of printing items when they are ordered or on demand. So instead of printing, 5,000 at a time and then storing them as inventory somewhere, and then obviously there are other things that come along with that. Products are printed as they're ordered. That is a better process, we think, and I think most of the world at this point thinks as well for lots of reasons. But at the very least, it's much better for the environment, let alone your pocketbook when it comes to the amount of overhead and inventory and other things you have to carry when you're doing a non-print on demand model. So, again, print on demand is the process of printing things on demand as they're ordered. And this applies or is applicable to a lot of products, not just books. But obviously, we're just talking about books here. That is the technology that we use, that Lulu has always used since it was started back in 2002 for the most part. But print on demand is applied to a lot of things. A lot of things you buy nowadays, whether you realize it or not, especially if you buy them directly online, have often probably been printed on demand. T-shirts, coffee mugs, pens, bags, it doesn't matter. You can literally do just about any product as a print on demand product. So print on demand itself is a really cool technology. And what can be done these days with print on demand is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we see it all the time, which I also want to point out right up here at the top too, that one of the myths that I think drives both of us crazy is this idea that anything print on demand is going to be lower quality than some of the more like traditional methods for printing and creating products, but specifically books. Yeah. That's a question that we get all the time, or maybe even an accusation that we get all the time is like, oh, POD books are just inferior quality to like the more traditionally printed books. And I am going to argue that a lot extensively. I will argue that. And I'm saying that as somebody who used to be one of those people. Like I used to absolutely be the kind of person that would be like, you can just always tell when a book is printed on demand when it's.
Is that how you would say it?
Yeah, like a really snob. I'm gonna catch myself before I finish that sentence.
To be fair, I do think there was a point in time where print on demand was catching up, and so it wouldn't necessarily have been poor quality, but there would have been a noticeable difference per se in certain aspects of a print-on-demand book versus a book that was printed offset or the way traditional books are printed. These days, yeah, you're right. And, like anything else, though, there are print-on-demand books that come off a print machine, from certain facilities, and they might not be up to par. But the same could be said for offset printing, all the way back to Steve Gutenberg. Not Steve Gutenberg, Johann Gutenberg in Mainz, Germany, where his first press was. I guarantee you there were things that came off that press that looked like hot garbage.
Oh, sure.
So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there has been a stigma attached to print-on-demand books, but I'd say over the last probably 5 to 6 years, that stigma has all but pretty much been not only disproven, but pretty much put to bed. And anybody who still believes that should come see us at a conference or an event, or just email us and ask for a sample of what one of our books looks like printed.
Now, I am going to add the caveat to this that a print-on-demand book that is done the right way will be indistinguishable from a book that was offset printed. My hair keeps getting caught on the microphone. This is going to drive me crazy. And by that, I mean, like, we've all seen examples of POD books that the pages are falling out, or the glue dried weird and the spine is wrinkled, or like the pages after a few years, not even a few years, a few months, get like that warped edging to them. And that's because those weren't done right. They weren't done well. They were probably, spoiler alert, rush printed because somebody insisted that they wanted their books overnight. And that didn't give them enough time to actually do the process correctly and let the glue dry on the different stages and let the ink dry and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And
we'll get to all that.
Yeah. But, just if a book is done right, if it's printed right, if it's done right, it can be genuinely indistinguishable.
So why would you use print on demand besides just being able to maybe have a smaller carbon footprint, cut out overhead inventory? Are there any other reasons why you might use print on demand in your business?
Well, definitely depending on the quantity of books that you're interested in.
That's right.
There's kind of a sliding scale of the cost efficiency of print on demand versus offset printing. There is a point where, like, depending on the quantity of books that you need, offset printing is going to be a more affordable option or a more economical option for you. But we're talking about like in the thousands, I think, at that point. For the most part, if you're doing a print run of 1, 10, 100 books, print on demand is the way to go.
You can push that up to a couple thousand for the most part. But
yeah,
it's the ability to, again, print and deliver one book at a time if needed, right. 3 books in an order, 5 books, 10 books, a couple of hundred, instead of the minimum quantity that most offset printers would require, which is at least several thousand or more units, again, which would necessitate, for the most part, warehousing, inventory control, fulfillment methods, things like that. The other thing to note, though, too, is speed. And so while some people are like, oh, I got to wait 3 days for my book to be printed and bound because it's print on demand, what you don't realize is oftentimes when you're buying a book from a bookstore somewhere else that's been offset print takes weeks to months. Yep. So, when a publisher puts in an order for a run of offset books for 5,000, 10,000, whatever that might be, even if it's just 1,000, it's usually done outside of the U.S. And even if it is inside of the U.S., print time can be anywhere from several weeks to months before those books are printed and delivered. The technology that a machine can literally print a book and thousands of different single books off of one roll of paper, cut the book blocks, and we'll get into all of this, bind them, do the cover, attach the cover, all that can be done in, 2 to 4 days max, depending on the type of book it is. That's actually really impressive. Anybody who doesn't believe what we're saying right now, you should go watch the video that Lauren's going to link to that we did. It's pretty incredible. So again, we're going to go ahead and get into some of this stuff, but for lack of any other argument here, suffice to say that print-on-demand technology has jumped light years ahead of offset and some of the other methods to get books to market. So let's talk about, some of the different terms and things that are applicable to not just print on demand, but books in general when you talk about the business of producing books. Yeah.
To be clear, like some of the things or most of the things that we're going to talk about in this episode, like this language is industry wide. Like we're talking about how anybody that works in the publishing industry, whether it's traditional publishing or self-publishing or print on demand or whatever, like this is the language they use to talk about different types of books.
Yes.
So, this is universal.
Yeah, we're going to turn you guys into print book experts. So
yeah.
Let's go. What's the first thing?
Awesome. So the first thing I think that we should start with right off the top is the trim size of the book, because that is something that I think confuses people a lot. Just because you don't really think about the fact that there are so many different sizes that books come in.
Yeah.
And by sizes, I mean the actual like physical dimensions of the books. So like, I just realized I'm going to be leaning away from the mic constantly. All right. So if you're watching on camera, I've just picked up 3 books or 4 books that are all the same size. Go me.
That's all right.
But these are all different, just regular print books, like novels, marketing guides, social media guides, stuff like that, whatever, that are all different trim sizes. And these are just for like the standard kind of actual text books that you're seeing. You're not also thinking about things like photo books, cookbooks, children's books, magazines, comic books, all that stuff. Those are all different trim sizes. So that's what that's referring to when you see something about a trim size.
So like a traditional business book, like I'm holding, the traditional size is 6x9, right? So 6 inches by 9 inches.
Yep.
That's a trim size. And then, fiction books traditionally will range slightly smaller. They'll go anywhere from, a digest size, which is a little bit smaller, up to, what is more common these days, I think, is like a 5x8, a 5.5x8. Airport books are often, for fiction, a slightly different size. They're a little bit weird, but nonetheless, trim size refers to height and width, right? So again, the standard business book that you would see in a Barnes & Noble is 6x9, 6 across, 9 in height. And then, again, fiction books are typically smaller. And then as Lauren said, other types of books will often go up in size. A lot of textbooks are notoriously 8.5 by 11 for simplicity. Lots of art books and photo books will go 11 by 8, so they'll flip it, and it's like a landscape size. But again, trim size is just referring to the actual specs of the outer, edges of the book, 6x9, 8.5 by 11, etc.
Yeah, and we'll get into more details on that too, because we do have, as you can tell, some examples here, and I thought we would talk through different product types and kind of talk about what the, not industry standards are, but like what the common and most popular sizes and design choices are for those different product types. So we'll get into that once we finish defining what these things are.
Sure.
Okay. The other thing you're going to see probably most often after trim size is going to be the binding type. This is talking about like the actual spine of the book as well as the book cover itself. So there's a whole, you'll see, if you watch the Life of a Book video, you'll see the process of how these different books are bound, which is really cool. But the most common that everybody knows is a paperback, obviously kind of exactly what it sounds like, but specifically perfect bound paperback is the actual technical term for the type of paperback that we're all so used to seeing. And that is the one that is, the pages are glued directly onto the spine, or the other way around, actually. It's the book block, which is the interior section, or like the interior pages of your book, are bound together and then glued directly to, or the cover is glued directly to them. And it is a soft cover. There is nothing in there to make it like, there's no cardboard or chipboard or anything in here. It's just a sturdier, heavier paper.
Yeah.
With the cover art printed directly on it.
That's right. Most paperbacks are perfect bound.
Yes.
In fact, all paperbacks are technically perfect bound for the most part.
Well,
when you start getting into comic books and saddle stitch and other things, that's different. But
so that is an alternative to the perfect bound. Is saddle stitch. So saddle stitch binding is for smaller books, like comic books. There is actually a minimum on Lulu. The minimum page count for a perfect bound paperback is 32 pages.
That's right.
I'm not sure how standard that is across the industry, but I imagine it's somewhere close, because obviously there does have, like, the book does have to have a certain thickness in order to be able to apply the binding to it. So if you're trying to print something that's smaller than that, something like a comic book or a children's picture book that has like a limited number of pages, you'll see saddle stitch as an option. And that, like, I don't know if you're really going to be able to see it here, but it is kind of the option where there's just staples or thread or something,
some light stitching,
just holding it together, and there isn't really a sturdy spine. So that's a saddle stitch option.
Yeah, it's basically just a crease.
Yeah. It's like pamphlet style kind of thing. But definitely works for sure.
Yep.
It's just a different option. And then in that case, those covers are paperback.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
And then the last one for paperback, you can also get a coil bound paperback.
I forgot about coil bound.
Forgot about coil bound.
You won't see those as often unless you're ordering those directly from people who are creating them for the most part. You might find coil bound in certain specialty bookstores or things like that, but you won't often find coil bound books at like a Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that we'll talk about in here too, and one of the things that is important to know is the design and format choices that you make for your books when it comes to stuff like this will impact your ability to put your book into global distribution and also sell your book in brick and mortar bookstores.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. We've talked about this. We did an episode on how to get your book into bookstores. So if you want to go listen to that one, we get into much more depth on that. But most bookstores will not carry a book that doesn't have a spine unless it is like a specific genre of, or it's like specific product type. So like if they have a section of notebooks, or if they have a section of travel books or travel guides that are all coil bound, like they might make exceptions. But like if you wrote a memoir and for some reason decided that you wanted your memoir to be coil bound, chances are a bookstore won't stock that because they won't be able to put it on their shelves as a coil bound book.
Yeah.
So, but that is an option that you'll see. People make some really cool coil bound books. This is one of my favorites.
It's very common
Lulu
for planners, for workbooks, for journals, things that are going to be used for a utilitarian purpose.
Yep.
Writing in, planning, things like that.
Yeah,
so,
some cookbooks. We've seen some really cool cookbooks.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Because that's a great way to get like the full lay flat effect where you've got the book out open on the table. So, but then also there's hardcover, and hardcover. We have two different types of hardcovers that are most common. I don't really think there is an alternative at this point. There's the hardcover case wrap, which is what Matt's showing right now. This is a book where the cover art is printed and then fortified with cardboard or chipboard to make the front cover, back cover, and spine.
Right.
And then that is attached to the interior book block.
And that is actually what you'll see being made in that video.
Yes.
That we'll be posting.
Yes. That's the book in there is the same format as this one that we're showing, which is Katie Brinkley's The Social Shift in case wrap hardcover.
Yep.
And the distinction with case wrap is that the cover is directly on, or the cover art rather, I'm sorry, is directly on the book. Something like if you've seen textbooks, cookbooks, things like that, where the cover art is printed directly on the book.
Yep. Yeah.
The alternative to that is a dust jacket.
Mm-hmm.
And so at Lulu, our dust jacket hardcovers are linen wrap.
Oop.
That's going to happen a lot, I think. It's a linen wrap hardcover. So it's the same way that the case wrap cover is made, where it's, a sturdy cover that is being attached to the book block. But in this case, it's a linen material that is being put on the cover. And then the actual cover art of the book is printed on a separate piece of paper that is folded and
it's like
removable from
all
the
those
actual
old
book.
School books that were in the library when you were growing up, or even now where maybe you go to Barnes & Noble, your favorite author's book is only available in hardcover with a dust jacket right now, and you get mad, but you buy it anyways, and then you go home, and the first thing you do is take the dust jacket off so you can read the book without messing up the dust jacket, and then...
Always.
Nonetheless, they're still my favorite book
Yes.
or style of book, because I just love a linen book cover in general. The dust jackets are whatever. I think that's great, but I love a linen wrapped book. It just reminds me of, old school books. And I just love the way that they look and feel and even smell. So this is definitely my favorite, and I always try to talk people into doing linen wrap with a dust jacket if they're considering hardcover versus case wrap, but whatever.
Yeah, we've done an episode on coming up with or designing a go-to-market strategy for your book.
Yeah.
And a big part of that episode was talking about the decision-making process for what formats you're going to release your book in and how you're going to plan that release strategy.
Yeah.
So, in that episode, we talked about the idea of not going to market with all of your book formats at once, which is something that is what they do in the traditional publishing industry as well. Like most traditionally published books are not released in all formats at once. You'll see a hardcover release first and then a staggered release for the paperback, and then maybe additional formats on top of that as well.
Yeah.
You're over this table? You want them all to be accessible?
No, I'm just trying to make it a little bit less awkward.
Fair enough.
I don't want to see you struggling over there to get the books off the table.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
I just figured while you were talking I would do it, but thanks for calling me out.
No, I appreciate it. You're being helpful. Thank you. I like having the I like being surrounded by books. Obviously, you've seen my library at home.
Have? Yeah.
So, which I rearranged a little bit.
Oh my God, I can't imagine.
It's okay. It's fine. I had nothing better to do with my time this weekend. That's absolutely not true. I use it as a form of procrastination, but it's fine. The next thing we're going to talk about, I feel like this is also kind of worth mentioning, is that the order that I have this laid out in is based on the order that our pricing calculator goes in on Lulu. So if you want to play around with these different options and these different formats and see what they look like, we have a tool on our website. It's lulu.com/pricing. I have it linked in the show notes. And you can go through the different combinations and different options for all of these details of your book format. So if you're following along at home, this is an interactive episode. Yay. This is the order that you would make those choices in. So the next thing in that step is the color for your ink.
Your interior file.
Your
right?
interior file, yes.
So do you want the inside to just be black and white? Do you want color? Do you want full premium color, standard color, premium black and white, or standard black and white? There's basically 4 color types.
Yep. Yeah. And there's, there are arguments to be made for all of these. The standard, like this is a novel or a memoir or a marketing how-to guide print book. Those are 99% of the time it's just printed in standard black and white. Standard is not inferior to premium. It's the standard for a reason.
Yeah.
So, that is a perfectly reasonable choice to make for just a regular book that doesn't have a lot of images.
Yeah. Premium black and white is typically only used for art and photo books that are black and white in nature, and they just need a better quality black and white because they want to print on thick glossy paper. So you're right. Standard black and white is the default for most books, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it should be.
Yeah.
One of the books that we have here that I love, actually, I'm always checking out this. I guess it's a magazine, technically.
I think technically they tout it as a magazine. Yeah. And there's volumes.
Yeah, so Black and White Minimalism Magazine, I think is their full name, is a photo journal that have been printing their issues with us for a long time. And all of the art in these books is all black and white. Like all of the photos in here, I'm just fanning it out and not facing the camera while I'm doing it. All the photos in here are black and white, and they actually use just standard black and white. This is not premium.
Oh, wow.
I checked. I looked it up in our admin tool. So it's very possible to have like a beautifully printed art book just using standard black and white color. But if you want to step it up a little bit and that's standard black and white color. Okay. If you want to step it up a little bit and have a little bit premium quality to it, you can as well. I think this one might actually be. Yeah, so this is a comic book that is black and white. That is a premium black and white. This quality is going to be terrible. No one's going to be able to see. We're going to be changing the focus.
The biggest difference, by the way, is just going to be that on a premium black and white, you're going to use a thicker coated paper. So the black is going to be a little more deep and dark and fully black.
Yep.
And it's going to be glossy and shiny. So, again, I didn't realize that minimalism one was standard. That actually looks really good.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I think it would pop a little better with premium black and white. But because it's a zine, they want to keep the price down for the end buyer, which is understandable. So it's still beautiful, and I think it keeps them at a price point where, you know, their subscribers and end buyers aren't going to feel like it's too expensive.
Yeah, which is one of the things that we see that, you know, these are the design choices that you're making. They're not just about aesthetics. It's also about things like price point, things like functionality, things like making it accessible to your potential buyers.
Yeah.
Things like that. You know, that's why I always recommend the pricing calculator, because it's a fun way to kind of click through there and see like, okay, you know, how is that going to change the print price on the book if I do standard color versus premium color? How is that going to change if I do, you know, case wrap versus paperback, whatever? You can see those different details that go in there when you do it that way.
Yeah.
So definitely play around in there. I was definitely in there last night while I was outlining this episode, just messing around with different combinations and seeing what I could do and what I couldn't. So that was fun. But for sure, I think that's one of the ones that's the hardest to kind of describe to people and show people and like really get them to understand that you can see a difference between like standard color and premium color.
Yes.
You can get a really nice book. You can get some really nice looking books that are just standard color white paper.
Yeah, it just depends on what you're trying to do. A book like this, it's all photos. Jeremy Janis, he does a lot of different photo books. He's a photographer. This one is obviously premium color, but you know, when you're doing stuff like this, that's what you really need.
Yeah.
You know, when you're showing, you know, crazy, rich, deep, dark, and bright colors, contrasting colors, you're showing off a body of work. You really should be using premium color, and that's going to be on a thicker paper. And even the cover, you know, is a very premium look. So in that situation, anytime you're doing something that is really dependent upon those colors because it's photographic or something like that, you really should opt for premium color on, you know, a heavier coated paper. But there are certainly tons of examples where standard color is appropriate and looks just as good.
Yeah, this is a web comic that somebody printed their comics into a book. Mm-hmm. And this is just using standard color. And sure, they could have done a premium color edition, but I think also in this case with this specific color palette and their art style, the standard color works great.
I think it actually works better because with the standard color, they didn't have to use the thicker, glossier paper. And for that type of book, that's a bit of like a comic or graphic novel, having that more of a matte look and not shiny and not super thick paper, I think does the book more justice. So that was the right choice, I think. Yeah,
let's get into that a little bit too, because I think those kind of go hand in hand in this conversation, is the paper weight and talking about how the different types of paper that you can have in your book interior and how that works with the ink choices as well. So paper weight, and I learned this because I finally decided to look this up after literally years of wondering and talking about it and never actually bothering to look it up. The paper weight of book is referring to what the weight of a ream of that type of paper is. So like a 60-pound paper, when we talk about 60-pound paper, a ream of that specific type of paper is going to weigh 60 pounds.
A ream being what measurement?
It's usually like a 500-page, like just like a stack, like a ream of paper is like when you buy the printer paper and you're buying like that stack of paper, that's a ream of paper.
It's not 60 pounds.
No, but it's like that. You know what I mean?
It's like to go back to your research.
No.
I think what's more confusing about referring to paper by weight, which is something that is primarily only done in the U.S. for the most part, by the way. Outside of the U.S., it's often measured in GSM. Yeah. And in the U.S. as well to a degree. But, you know, the standard way to talk about in the U.S. for a lot of people is by weight. And it's often indicating more of the thickness of the paper to a degree. But standard paper that you would see in a book, let's say you go to Barnes & Noble and you just pick up a fiction book, right, a standard mass trade paperback fiction book, the paper, the weight of that paper, you know, is thin. Like everybody's probably held one before. It's very thin. It's usually a cream color. It's almost transparent, or not almost. It's transparent. that's somewhere in the realm of 40 to 50 pound paper. It's pretty light and thin. You definitely wouldn't want to print anything on that other than standard black and white text.
Yep.
And otherwise you're going to get a lot of flooding on the pages. So that's to give you a baseline of like paperweight again. And then as you move up, like the lowest paperweight we use is 60 pound.
Yeah, our standard uncoated, this is the base paperweight for us is 60. Also, for the record, a ream of paper is a quantity of sheets of the same size and quality. International standards define the ream as 500 identical sheets.
Right.
So a block of paper that is 500 pieces of the same paper, and whatever that weighs is what the paper weight is.
So for it to be 60 pounds, though, that ream of 500 sheets probably has to be big sheets.
Sure.
Because a ream of 8.5 by 11 copy paper is not 60 pounds.
It's a whole box of them.
Oh, okay. So that's a case.
It's still a ream.
That's definitely 60 pounds or more for sure.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Okay. And if this helps at all, if you're like, I can't really picture a book paper right now or whatever, although if you're listening to this podcast, you should be able to. Yeah. Another reference point that I looked up to check on this was that the standard weight for like invitation or greeting card paper, so like that cardstock that's a little bit thicker cardstock, is 100 pound.
That's what our calendars are as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the range that we're talking about here, is that thin, like mass market paperback type of paper where it's a little thin. It's going to be like 40 to 50 pound.
That's right.
To the 100 pound is like that thicker, heavier cardstock that will stand up on its own.
Yeah.
Kind of
so 60 pound is where we start.
Yep.
And that's going to be extremely similar to, if not identical to, basically 8.5 by 11 copy paper.
Yes.
So when you pick 60 pound uncoated white or 60 pound cream on Lulu anyways, basically the thickness that we're talking about there is like copy paper. Your other choice is 80 pound coated. That's going to be a little bit thicker, and it's going to be a gloss coated paper, so that when you do premium black and white or premium color, that stuff really pops and stands out and looks very glossy and very bright, and all those colors shine through. So.
Yes, and I do actually think, and again, going to plug the pricing calculator, this is super helpful for you to figure out like what is possible for your book and what isn't. I'm actually pretty sure that if you select... Oh, no, just kidding. Sorry. My bad. Just kidding.
I've said coated and uncoated several times now, as has Lauren. Just as a quick side, again, uncoated, when you feel the paper, just feels basically like raw paper.
Yeah.
And coated means it's got that slick, almost glossy feel to it. So
yeah,
that's as simple as it gets.
This is coated.
And it's pretty easy to just basically look or feel a piece of paper and know whether it's coated or uncoated. Yeah,
you'll be able to tell, like you'll know what that means if you like think about it at all. I mean, you can see like on camera right now, for once the lighting is actually working to my advantage. How nice. Like the fact that you can see the gloss on the page right now, you can see that shine on the page. You can tell this is coated paper. Mm-hmm. So something like a magazine or a photo book where it's got that paper that's got a little bit of a shine to it, that is coated paper.
And then again, white versus cream. So
yes.
Those are the only two that we carry. Those are basically the main two in the industry. Certainly there are other shades or types of paper, but for the most part, you want to deal with white versus cream. Most traditionally published books you find in the bookstore of a fiction nature are cream. Most nonfiction books usually use white paper. Obviously, there are some, variations. People can kind of choose what they want, but that's kind of what the industry standards are for those.
Yeah, and this is what I just confused myself with. So I was wrong about the coated paper part. But for when you're publishing with Lulu, we so strongly recommend that you only use white paper for color, that we actually do not allow you to choose the option of 60 pound cream paper. If you choose premium or standard color then you have to get white paper.
Yeah.
Cream
paper also tints the color. So
yeah. We also don't offer 80 pound uncoated paper. Did we say that?
Nope,
already?
We don't offer. We didn't say it, but we don't offer it. You're right.
Right. So, which only really matters if, depending on the product types. We'll talk about that when we get to the product type.
Yeah, most of the time, 60 pound is fine for whatever you're doing. If you're doing something photo heavy or, a children's book or something like that, it needs to be a little thicker and sturdier than 80 pound. But for the most part, stick with the 60 pound where you can.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have cover finishes, which are very similar to paper coatings in a way. You have covers like this one. This is a matte finish. It's not very shiny at all, and it has a very dull feel to it. Most books oftentimes have somewhat of a matte or a raw looking finish.
Right.
Even though they might have like a foil or a shininess to them.
Well, and I don't want to say dull.
Well,
I don't want to say dull.
I'm not referring to the color.
Right,
I'm
that's what I mean.
Like the sheen and the feel.
I'm very pro matte, as opposed to.
I wish everybody was pro matte.
I know. I was going to say I'm going to clip that. As opposed to a glossy cover like this one, and that is a choice that you can make regardless of your cover type, whether you're doing or your binding type. So that's, you want a paperback, a hardcover, a case wrap, anything like that.
Yep.
You can choose your cover finish. The last thing that I wanted to touch on in here before we get into like different product types and stuff like that, just very briefly, was the kind of like custom extra details that you can add to books. We did a whole episode on this, so I don't really want to dive too deep into that. If this is something that you're interested in learning more about, go listen to episode number 43. But we are seeing more and more in the industry, this is a trend that has not died yet, is the details like sprayed edges and custom end paper and foiling and embossing on the covers, ribbon bookmarks, box sets, things like that. So if you have questions about that, we did a whole episode on it. Again, go listen to that one or reach out to us, because that is also something that is kind of a case-by-case basis when it comes to print on demand.
Yeah, and you want to make sure it's the right thing for your project.
Right.
A lot of people will be like, oh, I'm doing this thing and I want it to have all these bells and whistles, but that might not actually suit your project well. And all it may end up doing in the end is driving what you have to charge for a retail price up to the point where you might suffer from a sales perspective.
Right.
So understanding those things, what value they might add to your end user, in your project versus just satisfying your need to see something super crazy and frilly and whatever. That's really important before choosing, what you ultimately go to market with.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important to keep in mind for all of these different design choices that we're talking about, is to keep the functionality in mind and to make sure that you're understanding, like, I understand the value of having a book that looks really cool in your eyes, but if it makes it less user friendly for your readers, then that kind of defeats the purpose of it. Or if it prices them out of buying it because you were so excited about being able to get sprayed edges on your book that you didn't realize what it was going to cost for the print cost per book. Yeah. And now you've had to raise the price of your book so much that no one's buying it. Doesn't matter how cool it looks if no one's buying it.
All right. What kind of books can you create?
What a great question. Starting from the top, the most obvious, most common, just the catch-all term of print books.
Yep.
Ow, I'm going to hit my head so many times in this episode.
I already have.
Well, maybe
is this a bad time to tell you that this studio's not insured? Just kidding.
Great.
Sort of.
Great. It's fine.
Yeah. So when we say print books, we just mean regular, what is also known as trade or trade paperbacks or trade books. So just your everyday normal, again, paperbacks and trade size books that you're going to find in a bookstore, normal sizing for the most part. That's what we mean when we say print books. Yeah.
Yeah, you can use that as a catch-all term pretty much. I wanted to talk a little bit, like we kind of touched on this already, but just like the different like common specs for these types of books. Obviously, like we already said, paperback and hardcover, those details will vary by genre for those books. We see a lot of commercial fiction books tend to be a straight to paperback release. They also tend to be those smaller sizes, like a mass market novella digest A5 size. Drives me crazy when I look at my bookshelves and they're all slightly different sizes, but That's a me problem, not an industry problem.
It's definitely a you problem.
I know,
for sure.
It's okay. But the more like serious lit fic or like nonfiction or like the bigger books that come out are also literally bigger. They're going to be something like a U.S. trade, royal, things like that sizes, and tend to be hardcover first, paperback second. Again, go listen to episode number 35. I have that linked in the show notes for more details about that go-to-market strategy with your different book formats.
Yeah,
for sure. And then also, like we said, industry standard kind of across the board, standard black and white ink on the lower paperweight uncoated cream paper more often than not.
That's a costing thing. For mass trade paperbacks, it's to keep their costs down for the most part. It's nothing to do with, presenting a quality book or anything like that. It's just when you're printing 20,000, 50,000, 600,000 units, you got to cut that cost down somehow or another. So
Right. I also just want to, because I realized that I said the phrase mass market and then Matt said mass trade paperbacks, and I realized that I did not explain what mass market was. Can you pass me the top four? Yeah. So these are 4 different trim size paperback books that are all standard sizes. I'm going to use the Lulu terms to try to explain these. The one on the end, this one is a U.S. trade paperback. That is actually just an industry standard name to call this a U.S. trade paperback, which is a 6x9. That tends to be the biggest size. They don't really get much bigger for paperbacks. You don't see a lot that are bigger than that.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Sorry. And then you see something like this, this book here that is definitely not a comic book. Where did I get that from? I think this is the digest size, which is 5.5 by 8.5, which is much more common size for things like commercial fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, romance.
It's being used a lot more these days too for nonfiction and business books.
Yes.
I think honestly the trend right now from a costing and production standpoint is to scale down slightly where you can get away with it. So you are seeing more and more business books and smaller books in terms of content being also cut down in trim size. So you will start to see more and more of these nonfiction books showing up in smaller than 6x9 size.
Right. And that is, again, a function thing more than anything else. I mean, this example, the next example that I have here, and you can if you can see them in size comparison, the simple social media book is 5 by 8. Mm-hmm. So it's just a slightly different size than the vegan marketing success stories, but it's a great option for a book that you can carry around with you. If your whole point of your book is, I want this to be a reference guide for people that are doing social media or doing marketing or doing whatever it is, like you want this to be something that they can easily just toss in their bag and have with them as a reference guide. That's kind of the whole point of having your content printed instead of
and that whatever. Size, to be clear, is often referred to as novella.
Yes.
So
yeah. And then the last size, because this is what just reminded me of, this book is on Lulu's website. We refer this, oh my goodness, I can't speak all of a sudden. On Lulu's website, we refer to this as a pocket book. This is like 4 1/4 by 6 1/4 or something.
Something like
that. It's more or less a 4 by 6. Most places in the industry, you'll see this size referred to as a mass market. And it's the size that, like, quite literally, if you go into like any bookstore and you're looking for those old school dime store sci-fi novels or
which, by the way, novels, if you can find those, you should buy them, because at this point they're coming dangerously close to being collector's items.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the size, and this is like quite literally a size that you can toss in your beach bag or your pocket or whatever. This is the size that I'm using probably for my passport that I'm working on.
Well,
because I want it to be pockets. I want it to be I can stick it in my back pocket while I'm walking around Disney. Mm-hmm. We'll talk more about that later. Don't you worry.
I don't want to talk about it anymore until you start actually putting it together.
I have been.
Okay.
I'm working on it.
All right.
Okay. The next kind of product type that I wanted to talk about quickly is photo books. So photo books, we've shown you plenty of examples of those already. These are going to be books that are more graphic and image heavy. Sometimes they don't even have any text in them at all. Sometimes they just have a little bit of text or captions or something like that. And the biggest design choices that you see people making with their photo books and coffee table books and things like that are actually the orientation of the book. Yeah. These are the kind of books that are most common. I mean, you know, you're never going to see a novel that's printed in landscape. That's like, oh, this is a U.S. trade landscape, not a U.S. trade portrait. But for photo books and books like that, you will actually see a lot of people that make the design choice to do a U.S. letter landscape, or I believe A5 landscape is the other size that we have. That's a slightly U.S. letter and U.S. trade, and A4 and A5 are just the A4 and A5 are the common sizes in the UK, and U.S. trade and U.S. letter are, spoiler alert, U.S. common sizes.
Yeah. An A4 you can get in either orientation.
Yes, and the same with
you can get A4 landscape.
U.S. letter. Mm-hmm. So those you're going to see, but then also, as we've shown, a lot of square. This book is white and not showing up on the background. I didn't really think that far ahead. But you see a lot of square books as well. This is a children's picture book, not a photo book, but still the same concept. You'll see a lot of different design choices made there. And then we talked about, you know, design choices insofar as your premium color in black and white versus standard color in black and white. Are you going to print it on coated paper? Or are you going to print it on the lighter weight uncoated paper? Things like that.
Yeah, most of those books really should probably be on 80-pound coated. Again, unless you're not doing anything very color heavy. Just, you know, photos are okay if they don't need to be in like rich, vibrant colors or like things like that. You can get away with 60-pound or standard. But, you know, a lot of the photo books, coffee table books that are meant to be, you know, much nicer, they're meant to be admired. They typically carry a higher retail markup price, so it's okay to go and splurge on premium. That's what you should be doing.
I would actually very highly recommend that if you're not sure one way or another when it comes time to actually print and design your book, this is a great reason to order a proof copy. I can give you at least 10 reasons why you should absolutely order a proof copy of your book. But when it comes to the decisions like the paperweight and the ink type, those won't actually affect the design of your book. Your books, you can choose whether you want it to be premium color or standard color without changing the file type at all. Right? You know what I mean? Like
you can change the interior color without changing the file specs and
right.
type for unless you go up in paperweight. Because remember, if you go from a 60-pound to an 80-pound, there's a slight increase in the thickness of each page, which means your spine width will be different, and you'll have to adjust the spine on your cover. Yes. Right, your spine measurement.
Well,
so
it depends on how
technically,
big your book is in terms of page count. But that might be an opportunity for you to order comparable versions of both and say, you know, which ones look better. You can do that with print on demand because you only have to order one copy of a book. You don't have to order 1,000-copy print run.
That's right. Yeah.
Briefly, just subsets of photo books that I wanted to touch on, the style types for them. Cookbooks. Very similar, obviously, but you're going to want to consider the functionality of those. So we've seen traditionally photo books are case wrap hardcover that are either an 8.5 by 11 letter book or a square, but more and more people lately are trying like different styles for that. So we're seeing people do some really cool coil bound books, like we've said, or maybe if you're somebody who's designing a cookbook that has recipes, but then also has space for your buyers to make their own notes or like make lists or write in the book directly, then you might want to go with an uncoated paper versus the more traditional coated glossy paper for a cookbook. So those are different things to keep in mind with your cookbook design. And then picture books, it's actually, I'm kind of going to call that the midway point between a photo book and a print book. For children's picture books, which is something that we see a lot of people do print on demand and do very well. But that is something that the design choices in there tend to vary a lot between standard color and premium color. And then the paper weights, because that's something that you are trying very hard to keep the price point down on. You don't want to make a children's book too expensive because people aren't going to buy it, because they are books that kind of have a time limit on them. Kids age out of reading them and also tend to get a little banged up sometimes. So we've seen some really, really beautiful examples of people just using standard color, 60-pound uncoated paper and making some really nice books out of that. It's also something that you see a lot of people actually do in both paperback and case wrap. So, you might see somebody who does two versions of the same, whether it's a staggered release or at the same time release. It's a great opportunity for if somebody's buying a book as a gift and they want to get a little nicer version, they might get the hardcover case wrap version of it. But if someone's just buying a cool book for their own kid and they're not really caring about the presentation of it, they might get the paperback. That's going to be a more economical option for them.
Yep.
So again, it all comes down to functionality and keeping in mind how you want your readers and buyers to use these things.
No notes.
Great. I don't know. Do you feel like it's worth getting into, like the magazines and stuff like that?
I think we've already touched, for the most part, enough on them, what their sizes and characteristics are, but just know that it's an option for you. I don't think a lot of people know that they can do that stuff with print on demand. So know that that's there and it's an option. It's also a good way to test the waters with your content if it's suitable for, a premium style magazine or a comic book or something like that. Again, I think we should skim past what the industry tends to call no or low content books.
Wait, can we go back to magazines and comic books for a second?
Sure.
Just for a second, because I do want to point out, because we haven't had the opportunity to say that yet so far, we do actually offer the ability for interior cover printing on those product types. So that if that is something that you're interested in doing, where like a magazine you want to, or a comic book you want to have, I don't remember if I brought any books in here that have that on them. But if you want to have that printing on the inside front cover, you can do that with Lulu. So if you're not aware of that.
Yeah, it's called duplex printing, but yeah,
there you go.
It won't say that on the site. You'll just, when you're choosing to do a magazine project or comic book project, it'll prompt you if you want to upload an extra file, which will be the interior inside cover printing. So like on the inside of this comic book style book that's here, it's a saddle stitch, so it's stapled. There's inside printing on the covers. So yeah, that's a good point. Something that people should be aware of.
Yeah, for sure.
And then again, there's something called no or low content books. These are basically notebooks, journals, planners, things where either the inside is blank, it's just, lined paper or blank paper for sketching, or it's low content in the sense that there's some prompts and guides in there to get you to write in it. We're very well suited for that type of content on Lulu. 9 times out of 10, these things are often done as coil-bound projects, so they can be very utilitarian. They can be opened up and laid flat or folded so that you can write during, a conference or an event or something like that. So also a great option.
Yeah, there's really no like standard trim size or anything like that when it comes to that stuff. I do just want to point out, like Matt said, with the binding and stuff as well, you're never going to want to use coated paper. If you're creating a no or low content project that the intention of it is for people to be able to write or draw or color or whatever inside of it.
Yeah.
I know from experience of creating my own that the coated paper is just really hard to write on. Like none of the pens that I tried to use really were effective on that. So I had to switch it back down.
I can almost just imagine your
60-pound.
face trying to do that.
Yeah.
And how frustrated and angry you were.
It was annoying. I'm not going to lie. I was annoyed about it. Because I have a large collection of different pens and markers, and it was actually a little wild to be testing all of them and realizing none of them worked. It's fine. It was also during COVID time, and I was quarantined, so this was my quarantine project, and I was not having a good time with it. But that's fine. A couple of just last minute things that I want to touch on because I think they're important to know before we kind of end this one out. Like I said earlier, these are design elements that are also going to impact some of the other like parts of your publishing process.
Potentially.
Yes, potentially. So just something to keep in mind, your sales and distribution options can be affected by what choices that you make for things like your binding type, like we talked about. Some trim sizes are limited. So like not all trim sizes are available for global distribution. Not all binding types are available for global distribution. If you're just selling your book direct from your website, then it doesn't matter. You can any format that's available on Lulu, you can do that from your own website.
Yeah, and the reason for that, by the way, is if you are going to put your book into distribution through global distribution, you want it to run through our system for Ingram or Amazon or some of the others. The reason why you're limited in what trim sizes and combinations of paper and interior print you can do, it's because those entities are limited. It's not because Lulu's limited. It's because certain other channels, in an effort to streamline and not have to offer as many options, they've cut down significantly the amount of trim sizes and interior options they'll accept. So you just need to be aware of that. Like Lauren said, if your goal is to really be on those channels as well, and our calculator will tell you as you go along which ones qualify and which ones don't. But
yes, it will.
If you're not using ours and you're just kind of going about it yourself, again, just make sure you're aware of whatever the requirements are in terms of trim size and other options for whatever platform you're trying to list on.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other thing to keep in mind is that the trim size of your book is going to determine your interior file templates and your cover design. So that is something that you need to choose before you start doing your interior book formatting, because you don't want to like start doing your page formatting and you're formatting your book to a 5x8 size and then decide a little further down the line that you actually want to go with the 5.5 by 8.5 because then you're going to have to redo all of your formatting.
Yeah.
All of it. So that's going to be a bummer. So definitely choose that first. And also, you don't have to like entirely finish your interior formatting, but you need to have enough of your interior formatting done to know what your approximate page count is going to be.
Right.
Before you can do your cover design, because your page count is going to impact the width of your spine, which is going to impact your cover design.
Yep.
So these are things that you kind of have to decide in a certain order.
Yeah, and if you're using tools, by the way, like Atticus or some of those others to do your interior file, you've already picked your trim size to begin with if you're doing print, or you're able to do it along the way, and their tools will help you kind of keep everything in line. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Yeah. And again, this is the last time I'm going to plug the calculator, I promise. We have free downloadable templates for all these different things that are built into that calculator. So if you go through it and you say, like, my book's going to be the novella trim size, 100 pages, paperback, you can then, click a download button and download the templates that are pre-formatted to those size for interior and for your cover.
Yep.
So you have that all set up, and then you can just go ahead and plug your content into there.
Yep.
Trying to make it as easy as possible for you.
That's pretty easy.
I think so.
What would you say is your favorite book out of all of these that we have in front of us right now?
Oh, that's such a hard question. I love Rainy the Little Rain Cloud. I think it's a really, really beautiful, really, really, really well done, beautiful book. But also the real answer to that question is one that we haven't shown yet. And it's the one that is a web comic that someone printed that's called "Oh Boy, I Am Sad."
Who knew that the elder emo would choose a book called "Oh Boy, I'm Sad"?
I think that if you had been able to see the cover, I think if it hadn't had another book on top of it, you would have known the answer to that question before you asked
That's
it.
fair. I didn't necessarily realize that was down there.
But yeah, no, this is one of my favorite books that I've ever found on Lulu. So
All right.
Shout out to that creator. What about you?
I guess of what we have up here, my favorite would be the Black and White Minimalism magazine. They do a really good job. There's always really cool black and white photos in there. especially of different architecture and things, which I'm a fan of. So
Yeah.
of these, I would say that's probably my favorite.
That's fair. I'm gonna give a shout out to Tilt Publishing, because this specific color combination of orange to pink to purple is one of my like favorite color.
It's a great cover.
Like, yeah. And it's such a simple, great cover. And I just love these colors. So I always am very fond of this book as well.
Yep.
So,
all right.
yeah.
Lastly, what do your bracelets say?
What do my bracelets say?
And I'm going to be very disappointed if they don't deal with print books.
Well, one of them says, "I wish I was reading."
Mm-mm.
Okay. That's unfortunate. One of them says Sour Wolf. And one of them says This Version of You.
You missed a really good opportunity to do some cool bracelets.
I know. I didn't have time.
All right.
I thought about it.
Maybe next time.
I thought about starting to make episode related bracelets, but that's going to be very much a time dependent thing for sure. We'll see. I got to get started on my CEX bracelets. So
there's some other things you need to get started on.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. Don't worry. I have a long list.
Should I tell them?
You want to?
That's up to you. I don't know.
It's up to you.
Is that going to help motivate you?
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah. We talk about doing it in public all the time. So.
Well, yes. So I've asked Lauren to write a book with me.
Yep.
Called Publish and Prosper.
Wow.
That is our journey through this podcast so far, but that will educate and teach people how to publish and how to prosper from their publishing.
Yeah.
And I'll have a lot of cool stuff in there.
I think it's going to be great. I'm really excited about it.
So get started on it.
Okay. All right. Just give me like 2 more weeks.
We're going to start doing like a chapter tally or something.
Okay.
Every episode.
We could do a check-in. Oh, maybe that's one of the things that we could put on this wall somewhere. It's like a progress tracker.
You were touching that wall in a very odd way.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It was further. The problem was that it was further back than I thought it was.
That's right.
I expected to. It's fine. This room is a work in progress. So if you're.
We're a work in progress.
Always.
Yeah. All right.
Yep. Okay. Well, if you have any questions about any of this, please let us know. This is something that I think that we could talk about for a very long time, because I think both of us find it interesting.
Yes.
And also something that I recognize is hard to wrap your head around without having the books right in front of you, or without having like a lot of personal in-depth knowledge of the publishing industry. So please reach out to us, ask us if you have questions, if there's anything that we could explain better. You know, maybe it's not something that we can explain on the podcast, but I can create some like Instagram content or something that we can share with you. You know, we'll figure it out. But if you have any questions about anything we talked about here, please let us know. We're here to help. Podcast@lulu.com. That's all I got.
Bye.
Bye. To learn more about this episode, check out the show notes on publishprosperpodcast.com. Publish and Prosper is brought to you by Lulu.com. To hear more episodes like this one, please like and subscribe wherever you listen. Thanks for tuning in.